Good evening. You are listening to The Truth Tank, and I am your host, The Tank. It's been a while since the last episode. I haven't recorded in a while. 2022 hasn't really gone to plan for a lot of people around the world. This year just continues to get worse. This episode will be the third and final part of the epic and probably pretty tedious at this point review and recap of Jurassic World Dominion and Gun Maverick. Research is still continuing for the next episode. I've been researching pretty heavily the next episode in the last couple of weeks. I started writing it back on the 7th of March, and I'm about 31 pages into it. It's taken a fucking long time, and it's going to be an epic show. A lot of time and effort and blood, sweat and tears have gone into it, so I hope everybody enjoys it and learns something from it. I wanted to get a lot more episodes produced this year, and so far that hasn't happened, so I do apologise for that. I've been working as hard as I can to get as many episodes produced as possible. I'm trying to pick up the pace now towards the end of the year, so I'm hoping to have a few more out in the coming weeks and months. I'll also be introducing a few more extra shows here and there that are not so scripted and not so heavily researched. That will be covering more mainstream topics like entertainment and media. The first of these new episodes will be out in a couple of weeks, so definitely stay tuned for that. I've also recently launched the Truth Tank Instagram page, so if you haven't checked that out, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could go over and give it a follow and share it around. Don't really know what I'm doing 100% yet on Instagram. I've been slowly learning the ropes over the last couple of weeks. Posting pictures that relate to the podcast has been a bit challenging. It's been a bit difficult to find them, and I'm still learning how all that shit works on Instagram. It's a bit different to Facebook, and it's a bit more of a challenge to work out what would make good visual content on Instagram as opposed to Facebook. And obviously being a podcast, it's the visual side of things are a little bit trickier. Anyway, that will get figured out in the future. I'm trying to get into the habit of posting on Instagram as regularly as Facebook. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank Instagram page, you'd be greatly appreciated. So without any more interruptions, let's get into tonight's show. This is episode 40 of the Truth Tank, Jurassic World Dominion versus Gun Maverick, a battle of the modern day blockbusters, part 3, the third and final part. So Dodson uncovers what Ellie has been up to and burns the locust lab. The locusts are on fire, and they get out and escape into the sanctuary and into the cool night's air by a poorly placed emergency ventilation tunnel that leads to the top of the building. I mean, it's completely bullshit, and over the top the bugs would have been killed within a couple of seconds. But for whatever reason, the giant locusts seem to be fire retardant, and they seem to stay on fire for at least 10 minutes, flying out of the building and into the forest on fire. They get out through a poorly placed emergency ventilation system. They go out into the night and into the forest and pretty much set fire to everything, despite the fact that they're surrounded on all sides by snow-capped mountains and it seems pretty cold. The forest would be way too damp for it to set fire and create a forest fire. The air would have been cold and damp, and it probably would have put the bugs out. They only would have survived a few seconds before completely burning up. So the fire spreads, and by this point there is absolutely no saving this train wreck of a story. The fire spreads throughout the forest. Fire rains down on the Jeep and all throughout the sanctuary. The Jeep crashes, all the heroes meet up. Malcolm's reunited with Ellie and Alan. Claire and Owen meet the original characters for the first time, and just before the corporate attack dog, the Gigantosaurus, attacks. It does a pretty half-assed job. There's no intensity to this scene at all. There's no peril. There's no real danger, unlike the T-Rex attack from the original Jurassic Park, and this is very similar. The T-Rex attack is fucking terrifying. This scene, however, is more, can we just hurry up and get this movie over with, because this is dragging on way too long. There's no intensity. There's no sense of danger or anything with it. And it's very slow paced, it's very poorly edited, and it's very clumsily directed, which is a shame because Trevorrow can direct really good intense action scenes, but there seems to be only a few of them spread out throughout the movie. So this dinosaur is slow and it's not very effective. And also, they use a lot of animatronics in this instead of visual effects, which is nice. It's a bit different from the standard blockbuster that would have been all special effects. The only problem is the dinosaur just stands there like a lifeless puppet and kind of doesn't do a lot. There's no real excitement. I mean, it attacks people climbing up a ladder. but there's no intensity like there should be, and like there has been in other Jurassic Park films. So a bunch of pointless action follows. Malcolm waves a giant stick around like a flare, much like the first Jurassic Park, with a burning locust on it, distracting it so the others can climb up and get inside the facility. The scene is so lifeless that there is no danger of any of these characters being in any real danger. So the heroes get into the building, the Gigantosaurus attacks, it pulls the walkway down. Some of the heroes are on the end of it, which at this point it just comes off as a minor threat, because everyone in a few moments' time makes it inside safe and sound. There's a giant window overlooking the forest. Owen has his back to it, and the Gigantosaurus comes through the window. It nearly gets him, but no one seems to be scared of giant dinosaurs anymore, because Owen gets a knife and starts fighting it like fucking Turok, before Malcolm fires a flare down its throat and it runs off into the night, which it's just recuperating. And now you just count down the minutes until it reappears in the script. So the escaping bugs have caused you guessed it, a power blackout or a power shortage throughout the sanctuary. Only emergency power is working. It's sending a signal to the dinosaurs to come to the center of the park because, it's raining fire. I get the metaphor is pretty easy to get. The dinosaurs are facing yet another extinction event. They faced one in Fallen Kingdom, and now they're facing another extinction event by a pack of genetically engineered prehistoric locusts, who just happen to be on fire and raining down from the sky like miniature meteors. So the metaphor is painfully obvious. It's kind of cool, but there's no real impact to it. So the power's gone off. They need to put the power back on so they can escape the sanctuary. So the limiter things can stop the flying dinosaurs from flying too high and crashing with the helicopter or the plane or whatever. I can't really remember. I pretty much switched off by this point. It was getting very tedious, it was getting very long, and I just wanted the movie to be over. So the plan is to get the power on again. Yay, this is just another blatant copy of Jurassic Park, and it's just more pointless nostalgia. And it doesn't even fit the story, it's just completely dumb at this point. The park's power is shut down due to the bugs. The dinosaurs are being called into safe zones because the fire is, raining down all around them. Most of the dinosaurs are in a river and pretty close to the main building, so you think, what are a couple of flaming bugs really going to do? And at this point of the story, the entire forest is pretty much on fire. It looks very apocalyptic, and it's completely unbelievable. You think, why don't the dinosaurs just stay in the river and they'll be fine? It will eventually burn itself out. So Ellie and Claire go off by themselves to get the power back on. They go to the basement lab, much like the first film. And guess who's calling the shots? Ian Malcolm's calling the shots via walkie-talkie. Grant and Owen and Maisie go into another basement area to try and find Beta. Can't really remember what happens to Beta. She's written out of the script for a decent amount, so it makes it very hard to remember by this point what really happened to her. And that's the problem, is there's so many things happening in this movie, there's so many subplots. It gets really hard to keep track of them all and what's happening and what character and what dinosaur is where, doing what. And by the time all the subplots and characters converge near the end of the film, you can't really keep up with any of it. Just before all this happens, Malcolm makes a comment to Owen Grady saying he didn't like Jurassic World. He goes, "You're the guy from Jurassic World, aren't you?" He goes, "Yeah, I didn't like that one." It can be read both ways. Is this Jeff Goldblum making a dig at Jurassic World, or is this Ian Malcolm just being cynical of another company starting a theme park full of dinosaurs that turned to shit? I think it's probably the second one, but it was an interesting comment he made. I just thought that was a bit of pointless information. So Dodson, at this point, he's planning his escape. He tries to hand the reins off to Ramsey. He hands him his big book, his big manifesto of all his corporate bad guy shit, all his evil plans in the one spot. At this point, he finally figures out that Ramsey is not who he says he is. He finds out Ramsey is exposed and is found out to be the inside man and Ian Malcolm's contact, the man that's been pushing our heroes the entire film to uncover the Locust plot. In his office, there's the shaving can from the first Jurassic Park, all mangled and rusty. He takes that out of all his possessions and tries to escape down the Hyperloop. And obviously the power goes out, so the Hyperloop stops. He exits the Hyperloop and tries to walk down the track. There's steam coming out of the walls, and it really comes off as a very piss poor attempt at trying to build suspense. There's no real suspense, and the steam just kind of comes off as annoying because you know something's going to happen. He's the bad guy. At this point, pretty much no one has been killed. Surprise, surprise, he gets attacked by dinosaurs, and it's none other than the Dilophosaurus. So there's this little pointless nostalgic moment of the shaving can from the first movie and the dinosaur that killed Dennis Nedry, the Dilophosaurus. So you have the two elements from the first film, and it's completely not impactful. It has no weight to it whatsoever, and at this point is like, really, this is the best I can come up with. And I don't think I have to say it, but you pretty much know what's going to happen. Which also brings up the question, is how do the dinosaurs get into the Hyperloop tunnels? It's a very poor attempt at suspense, and you just know, a random dinosaur is just going to pop up and bring about the demise of the film's villain. So our heroes are off doing their thing. Carla, the pilot, she goes to get what seems to be the only remaining helicopter left in the park. Most people have been evacuated at this point. All the heroes meet up and are heading to the landing platform to get out of the sanctuary. If they ever make another Jurassic Park movie, or a Jurassic World movie after this, they should really make it where everything goes right and all the dinosaurs stay in their enclosures, and the tourists have a nice time and don't get eaten. Whenever there's dinosaurs involved, chaos usually follows. But then again, that'd be boring as shit. Because the dinosaurs breaking out causing chaos, 6 movies in, has become a bit of a cliche. And this goes without saying, there's spoilers ahead. So our heroes find themselves outside in the Bison Sanctuary, and they're heading for the helicopter landing pad to take the last helicopter and escape the sanctuary. The Gigantosaurus arrives, and so does the T-Rex for a final showdown. But unfortunately, there's no tension or drama to the final fight. You kind of know who's going to win. The Gigantosaurus wins the first couple of rounds. It knocks the T-Rex to the ground, and you think it's dead. And at this point of the film, I was like, if the T-Rex gets killed again, I am fucking walking out, because this is bullshit. Then the blind bird-like dinosaur with a giant claw shows up. Only this time it seems to have grown since we've last seen it, and this is the only new dinosaur, besides the Gigantosaurus, that you get to see more than once. So it appears to help out the T-Rex, who comes back to life after being stunned. It grabs the Gigantosaurus, they struggle, and the Gigantosaurus finds its demise on the pointy end of the giant bird dinosaur's claws. The characters make it out, including Wu, who is reunited with the old cast for the first time, which was kind of cool. He's not the Wu from the first Jurassic World films. He's a very broken and scared kind of character at this point. He's pretty much a shadow of his former self. So as the heroes are making their way to the helicopter, Malcolm says, "This is not about us." And once again, Malcolm is right. This film was clearly not about us. It was not about the audience. It was about Trevorrow trying to get every one of his ideas into the final Jurassic World movie. So everyone leaves, only the baddies get killed, which I only think one person, which is Dodson. Beta is reunited with Blue. The whole mother-child relationship of Blue and Beta is the only emotional thread in this film. There's not a lot of emotion with the old characters or any of the new characters, and the one character who provided the link between all the Jurassic World movies, who was written out of this one, has the only emotional impact of the film, which, like I said before, would have been a hell of a lot better if Blue accompanied Owen while trying to track down Beta. She could have picked up the scent and could have led him to the Bison Sanctuary. Even that idea is a bit improbable, but it fits with Jurassic World. So this brings about the end of Jurassic World Dominion, and unfortunately there's no real conclusions to the title Dominion. Nothing has really changed besides some, not all of the dinosaurs are in the sanctuary up in the Dolomite Mountains. The final shots are pretty much the generic visual effects shots of dinosaurs roaming and frolicking in packs. There's some emotional music playing over the top, but it doesn't have a lot of emotional weight to it. And I said it before, it's a pretty dumb idea having all these dinosaurs roaming around the one pretty small sanctuary. It's a recipe for disaster and mimics the failings of the first park. Now the T-Rex is the only apex predator there. The Gigantosaurus is no more. So the film ends with only a few other plots and subplots being neatly ended. There's no emotional weight. The characters go their separate ways, and by this point, the audience doesn't really care. The film is very underwhelming, it's overly long, and it loses the plot 40 minutes in and never recovers. It's pretty uneven tonally throughout. After the first 20 minutes, they pretty much put the script in the blender and pull out random pieces and stick them together in the hope of coming up with a coherent story. It's a real shame because it's a complete shit show, and it brings to an end one of the worst and ill-planned sequel trilogies ever, that being Jurassic World and not Jurassic Park. The Jurassic Park movies were not really well planned out either, but they made it work. So that is my personal in-depth review and recap of Jurassic World Dominion. Make of it what you want. I'm just giving my personal thoughts. Like a lot of you, I'm a big Jurassic Park fan. It played a huge part in my childhood, as it did with a majority of people, and it's a much-loved film. Unfortunately, it gets a Disney Star Wars treatment. So I wanted to find out a bit more about how did Colin Trevorrow come up with Jurassic World Dominion? What was the plan for this pretty ill-planned film? So I found an article on the Wrap.com that fills in the blanks. It's an interview with Colin Trevorrow and some of the writers, entitled Colin Trevorrow Explains How He Crafted Jurassic World Dominion as Ellie Sattler's Story. It's by Drew Taylor, published on the 8th of June 2022. The director and co-writer talks to the Wrap about reuniting old favourites and a possible director's cut. Jurassic World is finally here, and the director Colin Trevorrow marks the end of a very long saga that began with the original Jurassic World back in 2015. It was that early film that introduced the heroes of the new trilogy, Owen and Claire, who in the latest installment joined forces with legacy characters from Jurassic Park, Dr. Ian Malcolm, Alan Grant and Ellie Sattler. This is the big boisterous Jurassic Park fans have been anxiously waiting for, have they? Because after the Fallen Kingdom, I wasn't really looking forward to the third installment of this. I knew it was going to be a clusterfuck, and it was going to be very hard to try to undo the damage done in Fallen Kingdom, and to a lesser extent Jurassic World. So the Wrap got to talk to Trevorrow about wrapping up his new trilogy. The second film in the new series, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, was directed by J.A. Bayona, but Trevorrow produced and co-wrote. Whether or not he'd be down for more, and how Dodson got the shaving cream can out of the muck from the original Jurassic Park. So that's interesting. I want to know how Dodson got the shaving can out of the mud, and why he even bothered to put that in the film. It's similar to the other article. It has questions by the author and the response from Colin Trevorrow. So question. Let's start at the beginning. What happened to the prologue that was shared online? It was so beautiful and Malachian. I'm guessing that refers to Terrence Malick. This is the answer. Maybe too Malachian for a big summer movie. It was the beginning of the movie. It was the first 5 minutes of the film, and something I'm very proud of in our negotiations of how long this movie could be. And it's still a pretty long movie. We realised that it was going to have to go. Universal supported my request to just give it to everyone for free and let people watch this prologue as a way of bringing them into the world that we were creating. Hopefully, and I could almost say assuredly, someday you'll be able to see it again. Interesting. So I think the director's cut of this film would be even longer, but it might fill in some of the blanks in the original. So Colin Trevorrow is obviously a director that gives a shit about what he is doing in the stories, but unfortunately Jurassic World Dominion doesn't come off like that. If you had to cut anything out of the film, why didn't they cut the stupid subplot of Charlotte Lockwood? It didn't really need to be in there. We kind of already know that she's a copy of the mother. It could have saved 5 minutes, which would have made more room for the T-Rex. Does that mean there's a director's cut coming our way? We'll see. We'll see how things go, fingers crossed. And after some of the reviews of Jurassic World by film critics and fans, I think that director's cut will come out sometime in the future. The second film left it so open. There's dinosaurs running around all over the place. How did you tackle the problem, and how did you winnow it down to what we have in this movie? I wanted to approach it from a place of scientific believability. Unfortunately, if you see Jurassic World Dominion, there's nothing scientifically believable about how dinosaurs spread around the world. And plausibility. When we look at how animals have been released in the ecosystems over time, they're going to change the balance in a way that pythons affected the Florida Everglades, but it takes a very long time. but it takes a long time. This is 4 years later, and I wanted to really try to imagine what the real world implications would be, how quickly they would multiply, what kind of interactions humans and dinosaurs would have. The reason why we made the short film Battle at Big Rock was to set the tone for what this was going to be. It wasn't going to be dinosaurs battling humans in New York City, which would probably have been pretty cool, but I guess it's probably a cliched idea at this point, given that pretty much every movie monster has attacked New York at some point. It was something that hopefully honours Crichton's work a little bit more. I don't think he ever wrote a fantasy book. I get what he's trying to say, but this movie probably should have been set 10 years after Fallen Kingdom, when it would have been a bit more believable that dinosaurs could spread, not 4 years, because like I mentioned before, it took 50 years for rabbits to find their way all around Australia. And Australia's just one country, and it's a pretty big one, and that still took 50 years for a small invasive species like a rabbit to pop up all around it. The reference to the pythons getting out of the Everglades is interesting. Like he said, he tried to base it in scientific believability. That's not that believable, because pythons haven't spread all around the United States, so the time frame for Jurassic World Dominion should have been a hell of a lot longer. It would have been more believable that way. Was that one of the challenges too, getting to a place where the dinosaurs will be in this somewhat confined space, and obviously still making sure all hell breaks loose from there. For me, it's the second half of the movie, when they started to converge into that environment. It may have been just because I did grow up on Jurassic Park. But each of these films rely on the humans not being able to just call an Uber and get out of there. They have to be trapped in a confined space in order for the kind of sequences that the movies thrive on to exist. Yeah, but at the same time, you can also be original and go a completely different direction rather than rehash old ideas that have been done several times already. I also felt like we've taken the audience on a journey that has a lot of new in it in the first half. That's true. The second half does become quite repetitive. It's a lot of new ideas and new sequences. Well, you'd hope so, given the resources these studios have at their disposal. I also felt like we've taken the audience on a journey that has a lot of new in it in the first half. It's a lot of new ideas and new sequences. I felt, as we get toward the end of this meal that we'd been serving, it was important to bring out some comfort dishes and make sure that as our characters collided with the Jurassic Park characters, it really felt like Jurassic Park. At the same time, you can do your own thing. You don't have to always tie it back to the original. With all the resources these studios have at their disposal, it is really annoying that this is the only thing they can come up with. Scenes that are cliched and scenes we have seen before. Can we talk about the Malta sequence, because it's so fun? With the black market dino dealers and all of that, was that a slice of this post-Jurassic World life that you were dying to get into? We're not here to send messages with our films, but each of them are grounded in something, hopefully, that the world is feeling at the moment. When we made Fallen Kingdom, that was a movie about displacing animals from their natural habitat and the potential consequences of that. One of the things that we didn't depict in that film is animals bought and sold in markets. That's something that we wanted to build into this. The sense that one of the justifications for why they are spreading all around the world, and how valuable they would be to so many people, and how impossible it is for humans to deny the opportunity to make money, regardless of how it affects the natural world or animals that live in it. Kind of sounds like a message. Whether or not he intended to put a message in this movie, it does come off like there is a very strong message about animal rights, poaching and animal trafficking. And the whole chase sequence that follows with the bad raptors must have been incredibly complicated. It was. It felt like a lot of my answers tend to be the same. I tell you what it means to me, and then it's also super awesome. There's the kid in me who's like, and then they're running through the streets, but both of these are me. In this case, it was important to me to not necessarily walk back the technology that we had been introducing when it comes to the way that Owen Grady and Barry, Omar Sy's character, studies with the raptors and now being applied in the world. I wanted to keep it feeling based in the realities of what animals can do. If animals catch a scent, they will hunt you until you're dead. We just wanted to stick to that instead of going deeper into sci-fi territory. In my opinion, I think the problem is that they did go into sci-fi territory with the whole laser pointers and commanding the dinosaurs. Because if that was true, the dinosaurs would have been able to pick up their scent and rip them to pieces without being prompted to do so by a woman with a laser pointer. And that goes back to the stupid laser pointer gun in Fallen Kingdom. There are also this idea of the locusts that are threatening the world, and it's something that has to be kept out of the marketing. We're holding on to it. Actually, it's in the first trailer. There's a bunch of locusts chasing those kids. We actually just kept a story out of the trailer in a lot of ways, except you put that scene of the locusts chasing the kids in the trailer. I noticed that, and I thought, are they bringing bugs back to life as well? I never thought the locust would be the main focus of the story. Now that you've seen the movie, the story that I think they're selling, it's not necessarily even the main story of the movie, and I would agree with that. Because I went in anticipating one thing, but got something completely different. And it was a little annoying because it's supposed to be Jurassic World Dominion and not genetically engineered locusts run amok around the world. So even though it's true, honestly, it came from my desire and Emily Carmichael's desire to make this Ellie Sattler's story, and for her to be the engine of it. Yeah, of course, because you can't just tell a good story anymore with characters that were first introduced 30 years ago. You have to have some type of agenda behind it. Why did it have to be Ellie's story? Because it doesn't really come off as Ellie's story. We see this all the time in modern blockbusters. There's always some agenda behind the story. You can't just tell a story anymore. It has to be pro this, anti that, favours this gender, but claims that it doesn't. Just give us a good fucking story and we'll be happy with it. She is a paleobotanist and she studies ancient plants, and our knowledge of how ecological history can help protect us from extinction. We want to honour her area of expertise, and to me, that was more important than keeping everything about Jurassic focused solely on the dinosaurs, and I think that is the biggest mistake he made, is taking the focus solely off the dinosaurs. If you're anything like me, I didn't give two fucks about genetically engineered locusts. I wanted to see dinosaurs for what could probably be the final time. It probably won't be, but I wanted more dinosaurs and more original characters. And so the movie is so deceptive in its titling, which made the movie even more unlikable. These insects have survived 65 million years of evolution. There's actually one of them in the prologue. The very first shot has one of these locusts in it. To me, it was another opportunity to just recognise that the climate crisis isn't just about extreme temperatures and storm systems. It's about tilting the delicate balance of the planet's essential biology. In this case, I felt like, as we talked to our geneticists and scientists, this was the scenario that they laid out about how genetic power and the manipulation of it could cause worldwide disaster, not just in some neighbourhoods or continents or where characters happen to be, but everywhere. That, to me, it just felt like it allowed our movie to be about the very thing that Jurassic Park was about. It was a dire warning, and it is that the consequences of genetic power that was unleashed back in 1993 in a real-world scenario. And yet he claims the movie didn't have a message. It's a funny way to express it. While I do agree with that and all the climate change stuff he mentioned, the locust in the prologue also was cut out of the film. You do see it in the first 5 minutes that were cut out, but that's not in the movie, so it's not really that relevant. And while that is very interesting about genetic power, I feel like Trevorrow should make another movie about how genetic power can destabilise the planet and the climate. That would be a hell of a lot easier, because like I said before, there's just too many ideas in this movie. If he had have taken that and done like a spin-off or made a movie that was kind of like that, a science fiction movie that is about genetic power gone wrong, maybe a company was trying to make genetically engineered bugs to control food crops, that would have been a great story all on its own. And it's one that, while it does fit the mold of Jurassic Park, wasn't necessarily one that should have been in Jurassic World Dominion. It should have been in its own film. But nevertheless, it is pretty interesting. And you got to see them on fire, which looks really cool. You know how I think. It might look cool, but ultimately it's pretty dumb. What was your approach to bringing back the original cast and the mixture of nostalgia to new ideas and new dinosaurs? This must have been a tricky balancing act. I think it all is. We had essentially 9 major characters, and all of them needed a beginning, middle, and an end. 3 of them, and honestly, 4 of them because of Dr. Wu. Even though he's been in all 3 of our movies, there is something deep within us that connects to characters that we saw in our childhood for the first time. It's really hard for us to let some of those stories go, because when we experience them, I'm very conscious of how important Ellie and Alan and Ian are to a generation that grew up on Jurassic Park. My job was to make sure that they were shown the respect of putting them on a fully fledged adventure and putting them in danger and making an intrinsic part of the story. We've got there by really talking to each of them and considering that they are the authorities on their own characters as much as I am, or ever could be. They've been those characters for 28 years. It was a bit of a conversation, and ultimately, not just the Locust storyline, but the parenting storyline with Owen and Claire, all those came out of what those actors felt their characters needed in order to, I don't want to say complete their destiny, but that's really what we're doing. Yeah, maybe you needed to cut some of those ideas out, because I mentioned it 100 times already, the movie is completely full of subplots that really don't go anywhere, and it's very hard to follow. So now we get to the question that a lot of people want to know. Do you have a reasonable explanation as to how Dodson got the shaving cream can? How did you get it off the island, out of the mud? How did he get it out? We may have an opportunity to see that in the future. I don't know if you watch our Netflix show, but if you know any kids who do, there may be an answer somewhere. That doesn't really tell us much. Michael Arndit was a special consultant credit. What did he do on the movie? Michael and all of those writers, and even some, unfortunately, that we weren't able to list just yet because the WGA has been working on creating an opportunity for all writers to be acknowledged. There's a couple of names that I wish could be there but aren't, because we were playing by the old rules. We just would spend a day with writers, a couple of days in some cases, writers who we respected, who were especially world builders or great storytellers. Christy Wilson Carnes is another, David Kemp himself, the writer of Jurassic Park, to just kick the tires on our story and ask us questions, make sure what we were doing was landing the way that we wanted it to land. This is a big movie, and it's a film that a lot of people obviously anticipate and are going to have certain expectations of for. I think it would be arrogant for Emily and I to think that we could do it alone, and we had a lot of help. The big question is, obviously, is this the end of your run in the franchise? Are you cooking up new things? This does not conclusively end any story, really. It's still pretty open. It's the end of certainly me directing these movies. The torch is being passed to me, and I think it's time to pass the torch to someone else. Yeah, I'll put my hand up for that job. You can pass the torch to me. I'll make the next trilogy of Jurassic Park movies. Just throwing it out there. I think there's another director out there who's going to look at this new world that we've created and hopefully consider the new characters that we've built in this movie, specifically DeWanda Wise's Carla Watts and Mumbadoon Athi's character Ramsey Cole and Daichin Lachman to be a gift. I think they're all really amazing, and hopefully someone will be inspired and he or she can take this into the future. Yet once again, I'll volunteer my services to direct the next 3 films. In contrast with that last article, I found another article on radiotimes.com. It's about Colin Trevorrow defending the movie after it's been so heavily criticised by critics around the world. So it's pretty interesting what he has to say. The article is called Jurassic World Dominion's Colin Trevorrow Defends the Film's Storyline, and it's by Hugh Fullerton, published Saturday 11th of June 2022. Some critics have been disappointed that the sequel doesn't go down the humans vs. dinosaur route promised in the trailers, but the co-writer and director say it wouldn't feel real. Well, I had to break it to them that the entire movie doesn't feel real. It's over the top and ridiculous, and very unbelievable. Yeah, and that's the problem, not just with the Jurassic World Dominion trailer, but with a lot of trailers. They either give too much of the movie away, or they create a version of the movie in your mind that, when you see the movie, has nothing to do with it. They create a loose narrative in the trailer with the key scenes. They usually give way too much away. They always give away the good stuff, and they always give away the ending of a film in most cases. But Jurassic World Dominion definitely gave you the feeling that this was going to be about humans and dinosaurs. And ultimately, it's not really at all. And I think that's what pissed off a lot of critics and fans. They went in expecting one thing with a huge lot of expectations, and they got something completely different. Something that, like the article just said, was nothing like the trailers had promised. Alright, so let's get into the article. If you're expecting Jurassic World Dominion to be an epic dinosaur versus human struggle on a worldwide scale, think again. Because despite some suggestions of that in the trailers, the finished film tells quite a different story, based on genetic modification, Jason Bourne-style globetrotting, and an evil CEO billionaire. It's fair to say that some have been disappointed with this direction. RadioTimes.com's own reviewer said that there's so much potential with the concept of dinos roaming free, and the sequel doesn't always make the most of it. But Trevorrow is firm that it was the right way to round off his Jurassic World trilogy. I agree with that reviewer. It had so much potential, but definitely missed the mark. I think there's a sense that this movie is about dinosaurs and humans battling for dominance over the planet, and only one can win. And it sounds cool, Trevorrow told RadioTimes.com. But when you actually think about what that actually means, it doesn't really feel real. And so I think that we've made a movie that is hopefully richer and more thoughtful, and approaches things in a way that maybe people won't expect. I guarantee most people in the audience weren't expecting the way it turned out. Why I do agree with what Trevorrow is saying, and how he thinks it should end, and it should be more about the genetic side of things. That was good, but at the same time, it is a trilogy about dinosaurs and not about corporations and genetically engineered locusts and corporate plots. It is about dinosaurs, and there just really isn't enough substantial dinosaur meat left on the bone, if you will, on a trilogy where the dinosaurs are the main draw card. Later he added, instead of something that feels sci-fi or, dinosaurs in the city and eating out of Starbucks, like whatever that is, I just wanted to make it feel like, what if this actually happened? But that's the problem, is it never ever feels like this could ever happen. It feels like it's set in the future, and it's so detached from reality, plausibility, and believability. No one in the audience fucking believes it, because they went too over the top. I think the ideas were good, the execution was poor. Like I keep saying, there's too much stuff put in this movie. He said he didn't want it to feel too sci-fi, but unfortunately that's how it comes off. And I think we were all expecting more of dinosaurs having dominion over the planet, and I don't think many people thought that it was going to be dinosaurs battling people in cities, or dinosaurs walking in Times Square and getting a coffee at a Starbucks. I think most people were expecting that humans were going to be somewhat more threatened by dinosaurs spreading all over the world, and that's where the main conflict for the story was going to come from. Not so much that they're going to be blown away by the army in cities. I don't think anyone expected this movie to be a Godzilla film. I think you could have fit most of those ideas in the story if you had have made it more about dinosaurs threatening humans' existence and creating a ecological or climate catastrophe due to dinosaurs spreading out all over the world and uncontrollably breeding or something like that. Maybe make it more focused on what some of the fears and objections Ian Malcolm puts forth in the first Jurassic Park. The whole idea of life finds a way and it breaking through barriers violently and causing chaos. And that would have been a better way to round out the trilogy and bring it back to the originals without being cliched or being too nostalgic. We also caught up with Trevorrow on where the Jurassic franchise could go next, which comedy actor almost made it back into the film for a cameo, and why the film could have survived even without the return of some of Jurassic Park legends. So Colin, was it always the plan for you to come back to finish the trilogy? You sort of stepped away a little bit in the second film. To a certain extent, I continued doing the Star Wars movie that I was doing during Fallen Kingdom. Maybe scheduling wouldn't have worked out, but it was definitely something I wanted. And so when I realised I would have the opportunity to do it, I didn't blink. What was it like coming back and taking charge? What was the story you really wanted to tell here? I didn't really feel like I went away just because I worked so closely with director J.A. Boyona on the second film. And the challenge for me here was knowing I wanted to tell a larger story about genetic power, knowing that I wanted the legacy characters to be the engine of that story, and also being able to explore Claire and Owen being parents in the guardianship of a child whose unique existence is related to everything they have guilt over in their lives. So a lot of things I wanted to do, and working with co-writer Emily Carmichael to really streamline it into a story that is structured in a way that maybe most blockbusters aren't. but then really invest us more and more into these two parallel stories until they collide. And I will give it its dues. It isn't like a lot of traditional blockbusters. I mean, obviously length is a lot different, the pacing and the story is different, but like you said, the movie is structured a lot differently to the standard Hollywood blockbuster. In a way, that is original, because a lot of generic Hollywood blockbusters follow the same type of formula. So in a way, it is good to see a movie of this caliber do something completely different. Whether or not it worked out, different story. Did this film really depend on getting back those legacy characters? The great Sam Neill, Jeff Goldblum, Laura Dern? Or was there a version of this you could have made if they said no? Well, you've seen it. I mean, there's a film in there where it's just two parents trying to find their daughter. And yet, the way that those stories ultimately weave together and how they become so relevant to each other's adventure, I think actually the film will benefit from rewatch value if you know that going in and you see how it's built. I know these movies get watched again and again by kids, and so I don't think about the first time. I think about the fifth time watching a movie and how it plays then. And it's easier for me because I've watched it 100 times. However, most people in the audience aren't going to see it 5 times, and if they don't like it the first time, they're not going to come back and watch it the second time. I mean, I've only just recently watched Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom again because I had such issues with Jurassic World Dominion, and I probably wouldn't have watched that if Jurassic World Dominion hadn't come out. I watched Jurassic World on Friday night, then I watched Fallen Kingdom on Saturday night, and I hadn't seen it since it came out in, 2018. It took me, 3 years just to buy it on Blu-ray, even though I've got all the other Jurassic Park films. So if people don't think it's good the first time, they're not going to come back and watch it, and there's so much stuff out there now, you really have to make a movie to a certain degree of quality if you want people to come back and watch it 2, 3, 4, and even 5 times, like June. We also have some returning characters from earlier in your trilogy, like Omar Sy. Was there anyone else you wanted to get, but couldn't? Well, I mean, I would always love to work with Jake Johnson again, and that didn't work out this time around, but I also felt, he and I are friends, so we see each other a lot. And we have a feeling now that, what we did in Jurassic World was just special, and maybe that's okay, that's all it was. Right, so now we come back to another Dodson question. We also have the return of a significant villain in Dodson, who appeared in the original movie. Was the idea to bring it back to the start? We always felt like Dodson and Bison, which isn't mentioned in the first movie, it's only people who read the book who even know that Bison exists. Interesting, I didn't know that. But for fans of Crichton, Bison as an entity felt like an important thing to define. And this movie gives us that opportunity. And it also makes me wonder why, now that we know it was part of the original novels by Michael Crichton, why wasn't it in the earlier Jurassic Park films? It would have been a really cool thread to have the shadowy companies going through both trilogies. But unfortunately, it's a bit of a wasted opportunity. But we also didn't want to make it an evil corporation. Unfortunately, I think it did. Well, not really. He's more of a evil CEO, not so much the corporation he represents. Because I don't think that's a real thing. I think corporations are made up of people who work for somebody who is making decisions very high up. And so to make that guy someone who feels like a betrayal to the values of all the young people working in the company felt like something a lot of us are feeling now and we could connect to. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It's a big thread. I mean, I know Mamadou, Arche's character, is a young man who feels betrayed by this icon that everybody looks up to, who turns out to be a pretty shady guy. And I think that is a very current idea. This might be tricky to answer, having seen it 100 times, but what do you think might surprise people about this film? I think there's a sense, that's worded very weirdly, that this is a movie about dinosaurs and humans battling for dominance on the planet. And only one can win, and it sounds cool. But when you actually think about it, what that actually means, it doesn't really feel real. And so I think that we've made a movie that is hopefully richer and more thoughtful and approaches things in a way that maybe people won't expect. But once they realise what we're after, hopefully they'll accept it as part of our whole trilogy. I think mission accomplished on that one. Obviously there's some big action sequences in the film. I especially enjoy the cage, when the whole cast in the forest being attacked. What was the most difficult to shoot, and what was your favourite? I mean, they're all challenging. The one that you're talking about is with everyone, and so being able to have that many people feel constantly in danger is really challenging. We had a big animatronic, it was night, it was cold, it was a pandemic, there was a lot going on. My favourite personally is the sequence I did with Bryce where she goes underwater. She and I had never had a chance to just do a dinosaur sequence together with her alone on screen, plus a dinosaur. And so it felt like a drum solo. After all these years, we got to just do something exactly the way that we would have wanted it to be. And she's a director, and so it felt like a really cool collaboration. And that was a very cool scene. It's one of the best in the film. I noticed the more practical dinosaurs in this film and animatronics. Was that a conscious change? I mean, it's something I always wanted to do, but it was about resources and honestly trust. Trusting the filmmaker to make choices on set as opposed to have the ability to make them later. When you make an animatronic, whatever you shoot is what it is. And I think more and more these days, producers and studios are used to being able to create a lot of things in post and having a lot of conversations about that. And here it's trusting me to get it on the day as if I'm there with the actors. So each time we're able to make more and more, we've had more resources to make more. If it was up to me, they'd all be animatronics, but they do have to run sometimes. So you can only do so much. You can't throw them underwater. They don't like that. And there are some very cute baby dinosaurs in this movie that are all animatronics. Were there any moments that you shot that you ended up having to cut from the film that you really regretted losing? Yes, there's about 14 minutes of the movie. I know it sounds very specific, but it is. But we'll all get a chance to see that. And actually, the first 5 minutes of the movie we put online 6 months ago. The prologue was the opening to that movie, so you can see how that might go right into the beginning. But I actually really like how the prologue does pay off at the end of the film. But if you haven't seen it, you're probably not going to know what he's talking about. I'm kind of interested to see what the director's cut of Jurassic World Dominion will be like. And a lot of director's cuts just put like a couple of minutes in, or 10 minutes, or extend certain scenes and you really can't tell that there's much being changed. So 14 minutes is a decent amount to put into a movie that's already 2 hours and 20 something minutes. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, was this the first Jurassic film not set at least particularly on one of the 2 islands in Costa Rica? Did you clock that early on? And was there any thought given to slotting one in? Well, they blew one up in the last movie, so you've only got one option now. It wasn't the story we were telling. Obviously, Nublar went through a serious tragedy in the last film, and it felt like the natural trajectory of this was to fundamentally change what the franchise is. In certain ways, because every movie has just been on the island, that may or may not be safe when people go to it. I think we've gotten into this pattern of assuming that that's what a Jurassic movie is, but to me it felt like, especially, if there are future stories to be told, to give it a little bit more room for people to be creative and to create a really natural, believable dynamic between dinosaurs and humans on the planet. Instead of something that feels sci-fi, or dinosaurs in the city and eating out at Starbucks, like whatever it is. I just wanted to make it feel like, what if this actually happened? And you know what, for all the shit he has copped for this film, he has tried something original, and it hasn't pleased every fan, and I do agree that it has to come off the island at some time, because we've seen this 4.5 times so far. It's going to get to a point where you're going to have to change the location or change the setting of the film. He gets 10 points for having the balls to do that, because there's going to be a lot of fans that don't like the direction that it's gone in. And I think that was always there in Jurassic World. Was kind of the hint. Jurassic World, it was not a park. It's breaking down that fourth wall. It also neatly sidesteps the classic Jurassic Park world question. Why would you go back to Dinosaur Murder Island? I was eager not to have to answer that again, because it's a really good question. Why? Why would you go? You mentioned future stories. Obviously, this is the close of a trilogy. Do you see there being more films? And would you like to be involved with them? It's really up to the audience. If the audience responds in a way to this that makes us feel like they want to know more about this world that we've created, more about the new characters we've created, Carla Watts, Ramsey Cole. It's 2 characters and they weren't really that interesting. I did want to create that possibility, but there's characters you could walk forward with. But I also wanted to tell the end of a story we've been telling, and of a larger story that Steven Spielberg started telling a long time ago. If that story did continue, where do you think it would go? I think it's up to the next filmmaker to tell me what that is, or tell Steven what that is. That's what I did. And I think for someone to have a really clear vision of where this can go, that's in many cases what makes them the one to take the huge responsibility and incredible joy of making these movies. I know he or she is out there and I can't wait to meet them. You know what? If you're listening to this, Colin Trevorrow, DM me or give me a call. I'd be quite happy to take over. I've got some good ideas of where you can take a future Jurassic World story. So you know what? Give me a call. And what's next for you? Got any other projects coming up? Yeah, I do. I'm producing some films of younger directors who I really admire, and I'm hoping to give them the same kind of support that I was given. And as for me, I'm working on a trilogy about our first civilization that had technology, Atlantis. Oh, interesting. You should definitely give me a call on that. It'd be very interesting to see what he does with that. A trilogy of movies about Atlantis. No one's really done that before. I've always wanted to make a movie about Atlantis. I wonder if he's read any of Graham Hancock's books. Advanced, lost technology. Could go the alien route, advanced humans with lost technology. There's many ways you could go with that. There's been enough books and stuff written about it. I'd be eagerly looking forward to that. Sounds great. To wrap up, one final question. When audiences leave the cinema after watching Jurassic World Dominion, how are you hoping they feel? What will be running through their heads? I hope a sense of deep satisfaction, and not just with this movie, but maybe just a sense of closure. Because I think with these films that are new versions of films that we've loved when we were kids, you sometimes leave feeling a lot of very conflicting emotions. Sometimes it makes you feel bad in a way you don't understand, or that you're aging in a way that's uncomfortable. That's a complex emotion. I'd definitely say so. I hope this film gives people a sense that their favourite characters are safe and well, that the dinosaurs have found a place of peace and found home. Maybe that'll make them feel a little bit hopeful. So that was on radiotimes.com. It's interesting hearing directly from the director, and it kind of changes the way you kind of look at the film now. So I'm going to have to see the movie a couple more times when it comes out. You shouldn't have to watch a movie 3 times to be able to understand it, and I think that is a kind of an excuse that a lot of movies like The Last Jedi have used. We have to fucking see it 4 times and read the tie-in book. It's kind of bullshit. You should just watch it and like it the first time. I'm looking forward to seeing a director's cut of it. So hopefully that can fill in some of the blanks and maybe fix up some of the pacing and subplot issues with it. But it's not all Jurassic World Dominion that has issues with it. The entire Jurassic World trilogy has. And going back to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, there's a lot of issues with that film. Some of the new ideas are good, but they're just not executed that well. One of the biggest issues, the volcano. I know the volcano's in the book. There's a dormant volcano on the island, which makes you wonder why you'd build a $1 billion theme park near a dormant volcano. There's always a chance that it could go off. I didn't realise that first time I saw it. I only found that out recently, so if that was in the book, then I'd give it a pass. But the volcano blowing the whole island up, I guess it's symbolic. It's symbolic, and it forces the story to go outside of Jurassic Park and into the larger world, which is obviously the plan. But I do have a few issues with the volcano. The cloning issue does fit with Jurassic Park, but I'm not sure cloning a human really does fit quite yet, because that technology is a long way off, and humans are obviously a lot more complex than dinosaurs. And you can't exactly just mix them with frog or chimpanzee DNA. Maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. I didn't really like the Lockwood storyline. It's just another subplot that isn't really well explained and just doesn't really go anywhere and doesn't get ended properly. Yeah, there's a nice nod to John Hammond in Fallen Kingdom with his partner, Mr. Lockwood. Can't remember his first name. You see his picture on the wall and they both have the same walking stick. And maybe this guy Lockwood's in the book, I don't know. So he's not a guy you'd really think that needs a partner. But I guess the other guy was more about the genetics, and John Hammond's more about the entertainment and showmanship side of it. Engines mentioned in Fallen Kingdom and in Jurassic World. We're given little hints at them. Wu's got something to do with them. Vincent D'Onofrio's character's working for Ingen, but it doesn't go much further than that, and then completely dropped in Jurassic World Dominion. I would have liked to see an end or some type of conclusion to InGen, or who might have been behind the company after Hammond's nephew was killed in the second one. Where was InGen in Jurassic World Dominion? Did they fold as a company, or did they just disappear as a convenient plot point? So, when I rewatched Fallen Kingdom in comparison to Jurassic World, I did like it a lot more than when I saw it the first time. I hated it the first time I saw it. Direction is pretty decent, regardless of what I thought about it. The script does fall short. It is directed pretty well. It has that kind of horror element that a lot of the Jurassic World movies don't have, or Jurassic Park films. And when you start to watch them back to back, you can see the links that kind of thread through all of them. The first part of the film was okay. I did like going back to the island again and seeing whatever was left of Jurassic World. But I wanted more of it. I wanted like another 40 minutes or an hour of going around the island, not just, 20 minutes or half an hour. I felt like some of the best scenes in that film happened on the island, and they were getting rid of the island and blowing it up, so the longer they spent on the island would have been nice. Second half of the movie has more of a horror vibe to it, and it's kind of improbable. You couldn't fit all those dinosaurs in one mansion. You couldn't fit them in some basement laboratory, and selling them off to the highest bidder was dumb. I've said it before, the customs, how they get them through customs, in ports and airfields. Animals would die in transit. The Indoraptor was a pretty stupid idea. I'm not sure how I feel about the whole genetically engineered dinosaurs. The dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are genetically engineered, and this is kind of taking that to another level. This is going to the Frankenstein level, where they're playing God and adding the elements they want. Make them bigger, more teeth, longer claws, that type of shit. The end of Fallen Kingdom with the dinosaurs running into the night and going overseas sets up Jurassic World Dominion pretty well, but ultimately it's not followed up on that well. Jurassic World Dominion starts off with that way, and there's some pretty funny, like mobile phone footage of people getting chased by dinosaurs all around the world, but doesn't continue that story enough, in my opinion. The final scenes of Fallen Kingdom are pretty cool. The T-Rex facing off against the lion, the Mosasaurus in the surf, and Blue running off into the suburbs. It gave us a pretty cool glimpse of what should have come next, or what was going to come next, which is unfortunate because Jurassic World Dominion does fall short, so it's a very disappointing end to what could have been a great franchise. Going all the way back to Jurassic Park, I remember seeing that in the cinema when I was about 6. It was the first proper movie I saw in the cinema, and I sat there quiet and captivated in awe the entire movie. I remember it being packed. I went with my parents. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I can distinctively remember seeing it in the cinema. I've always remembered that moment, having my eyes fixed on the screen. The dinosaurs were scary, but even though I was young, there's only one scene that really scared me, and it wasn't the T-Rex breaking out. That was, I think, more magnificent than anything. Yeah, it is scary when you first see it, but it's this, larger than life dinosaur coming out of a paddock and, trashing the cars. It was also a very captivating scene. The scene that got me and really terrified me when I was a kid was when the raptors are in the kitchen hunting down the kids. And I just remember sinking back into my seat, just being completely petrified that entire time until Alan comes in with a shotgun and then they escape to the control room. Jurassic Park was such a magical movie. It still is. I watched it the other day and it's just as good as ever. However, there are a few issues with Jurassic Park, and I didn't really notice these issues the first, 100 or so times I saw it. And there are a lot of, improbable things about Jurassic Park, besides the obvious, and there's a lot of continuity errors. Some of the problems, the big one is the power going out. You think you'd have a backup to animals that dangerous. If power was the most crucial part of the park, you think you would have a backup. Transporting a highly dangerous animal like a velociraptor in a box might not have been the smartest idea. Yeah, it looks really cool. It's a pretty intense scene. I remember that was pretty scary when you first see it. Why wasn't there a better locking mechanism on it? Why wasn't there some sort of lock? Why didn't it slot into the enclosure? Or why didn't they have the forklift up behind it so it couldn't be pushed back? Because the poor prick that has to go up on top and open it, you think that they would have an automated opener or a crane or something. But it looks cool for a movie. And how didn't the raptor get out? I'm assuming the whole end of that box isn't open, and it's a slot big enough for a dinosaur to fit through. The velociraptors are extremely dangerous, but the security seems a little bit low. Either way, good scene. One of the biggest what the fuck moments is the T-Rex enclosure. So when the T-Rex breaks out, the entire enclosure looks like it's flat. But yet when it knocks the car over and pushes it off the edge, it turns into a 100-foot drop. Because the T-Rex was standing in a similar position when it breaks out. Which means you probably wouldn't see it if there was a 100-foot drop. I had to do a bit of research to find out if that was true. And apparently there is a moat built around it, but you don't see it. And we're led to believe that the dinosaur crosses the moat and gets out. But that's not how it appears on film. So it looks good and it serves a purpose for the action scene, but doesn't really make a hell of a lot of sense. And why doesn't anyone shoot a dinosaur? There's enough guns at Jurassic Park, you'd think they would have shot it. If it was trying to come through the glass, that Alan would have had a perfect shot and had it dead to rights and would have killed it. But no one ever really seems to be able to hit one, given their size. Muldoon also should have predicted an ambush. I mean, he does say, like, the way these things hunt you is unlike anything else, but he falls right into the trap. He should have maybe blown one away. And there's a lot of workers you see in the start of the film, and then they all leave and go to the dock. You think that they would have a couple of more people left behind, and not just Ray and Dennis Nedry. He seems to be the only person that can control the security and how he has all this fail-safes, which does seem pretty risky. But one of the funniest things about the original Jurassic Park is just how low-tech it is in comparison with today's technology. I mean, the average iPhone probably has more power in it than all the computers in the security room. In the originals, the security room really isn't that impressive. There's like a big screen and there's like 9 computers, 12 computers or something like that, which seems pretty ridiculous given that they're controlling a huge park with electric fences and electric cars and all these moving parts. That's one thing I really loved about Jurassic World is the security element. The control room is high tech. There's fancy computers, there's screens and monitors for everything, for every dinosaur and employee there. The guards all have guns, they all have this militaristic looking uniforms. The fences look a lot more secure. They've got electronic tranq guns and they're prepared for the eventual breakout of dinosaur. And the T-Rex coming in at the end of Jurassic Park, I think it walks through a unfinished wall. It doesn't make any noise and no one really sees it. But you know what? It makes a great ending of a film. And despite all its flaws, Jurassic Park is a classic no matter which way you look at it. It's as good today as it was when it first came out. Yes, the special effects might be aging a bit, but they still hold up. And it's never really been topped. It's a masterpiece of filmmaking, and Spielberg has crafted one of the greatest movies of all time. I also found out that in the book, the Costa Rican Air Force destroys the island and kills all the dinosaurs, which is why they had to come up with a second island in the second book. Just a bit of pointless trivia. All in all, Colin Trevorrow is a pretty good director. He's a good writer, he has some good ideas, but maybe they're better spread out over the course of a few movies or a different movie rather than just trying to squeeze them all in to Jurassic World Dominion. All in all, I've got a lot of respect for Colin Trevorrow. He's a good director and he's a good writer. A refinement of some ideas probably would have made Jurassic World a lot better, but ultimately what's done is done. I'm looking forward to the director's cut, and that brings us to the end of the Jurassic Park portion of the podcast. So this brings up Top Gun Maverick. So there's a lot of hype around Top Gun Maverick. It's been delayed a few years because of COVID. I think it was supposed to come out in 2020, and it's been pushed back and pushed back. And thankfully it wasn't released just on streaming services, and it got the full cinematic release because it is worth every second. Top Gun Maverick is a near perfect cinematic experience. It works on all levels and it doesn't disappoint. Yes, it does have its improbable elements, but it is a lot of fun. And you do care about the characters and the world of Top Gun. And I think a lot of this comes down to the experience and professionalism of Tom Cruise. I mean, Tom Cruise's movies very rarely disappoint. He seems to generally care about the audience experience, and he cares if they have a good time or not. He wants to make the best movie possible, and this is a guy that's nearly 60 years old and he's not showing any signs of slowing down. Tom Cruise's action films are the best. I mean, a lot of the older actors still make action films at their age and they're not half as good as his. I'm looking forward to the new Mission Impossible. The Mission Impossible movies have always been good. The second one isn't that great, but 3, 4, 5 and 6 are all solid action films. Tom Cruise's other films that aren't Mission Impossible related are always pretty good. I always enjoy seeing a Tom Cruise movie in the cinema You know that it's going to be of a consistent level of quality. Top Gun Maverick is directed very well. It has all the elements. It's got believability, good characters, a pretty simple story that's easy to follow, but is good, and just enough bullshit to make it enjoyable. So it does have some nostalgic scenes, much like Jurassic World Dominion. The biggest difference between the two films is Top Gun Maverick, it doesn't seem corny or forced. They're more of a tip of the cap, and they do it just enough, where some of the scenes in Jurassic World Dominion seem like it's, it's there for fan service. It's just blatant nostalgia and it doesn't work as well. Top Gun Maverick also has its fair share of bullshit and improbability, but you buy into the world because it is made well. Top Gun Maverick's directed by Joseph Kosinski, who directed one of Tom Cruise's other films, Oblivion, a couple of years ago. Some of the nostalgic scenes are pretty much exactly the same as the first Top Gun, but they don't really feel that corny. There's a scene where he's riding the bike as the jet's taking off, which is, pretty much the same as the first one. But it fits the film perfectly, even if it is 30 years on. It works. And talking about direction, it is masterfully directed and really does prove that there is new ground to be covered in huge action blockbusters, and you don't have to always be formulaic or do what another film has done or a sequel has done. You can still be original and make the film work. And some of the shots inside the jets are fucking incredible. I know a lot of the cast and the people who were flying the jets had to film it themselves because you couldn't fit a camera crew in the cockpit. There's lots of shots of GoPros inside the cockpit filming the actors flying the planes, so you get all their reactions are completely real. I don't think there was a hell of a lot of acting. I think it was all pretty real, and they're just incredible. There's a scene where he accelerates and he flies off the end of an aircraft carrier, and you can feel the jolt when the wheel comes off the end of the aircraft carrier. But also Top Gun Maverick achieves one real pivotal goal. It proves that cinema is not dead. It proves that big blockbuster movies are still worth seeing on the big screen. And this is definitely a movie that has been made for the big screen and the cinematic experience. Joseph Kosinski's direction is pretty masterful. It was no easy task picking up the reins from the legendary Tony Scott 30 plus years on. And the same goes for Tom Cruise. I mean, he goes above and beyond for his movies. He does a lot of his own stunts. I think he flew one of the planes. The old, P-51 Mustang that appears in the film is his plane. I think he flew one of the F-18s in the movie. So the film picks up over 30 years later. So Pete is still flying in the Navy, despite John Hamm's, Admiral Bo Simpson's best efforts to try and have him put on the shelf for good. One of the more improbable aspects of Top Gun Maverick is the age of Pete. I mean, he's, in his late 50s. He's still flying for the military. I'm not too sure on the military standards, but I would think it would be plausible for an older pilot to still be flying, as long as he can still do it and perform at an elite level. Why not? I think, the Army, it's like 60-something before you have to take a pension. So Pete's age in the film is still plausible. There are a lot of older guys still flying and serving in the armed forces, so why not? The running time of Top Gun Maverick is also pretty much spot on. It's 130 minutes. The movie isn't weighed down by tedious subplots that just don't go anywhere. The script is tight. It's a pretty easy story to follow. The plot flows nicely. The characters all work. And there isn't, 30 million subplots going on like in Dominion. And, the action scenes are outstanding. It has some of the most intense action scenes and sequences I've seen in recent years, if not ever. Some of the scenes with the planes are just incredible. It really does make you scratch your head and wonder how they filmed that. Some of the scenes in training where, they are flying along the ground and they pull up and go completely vertical. They're just completely mind-blowing. And it's all real. There is very few visual effects in it. And this being a sequel, there's a lot of links that connect the first and second films with a very coherent thread. There's no over-the-top or hard-to-follow plots, given that there has been over a 30-year break in between films. Top Gun Maverick picks up pretty much where Top Gun left off. Despite the decades that have gone by, as soon as the movie starts, you're back in the action and back in the world of Top Gun. Like it's only been a couple of years since the last film came out. And one of those threads back to the original is Rooster, played by Miles Teller, who is outstanding as always. Rooster provides the emotional connection back to the first Top Gun. He is the son of Goose. Tom Cruise is on point in his performance. You can tell he actually gives a shit about the character, and he is in his element. I think he gives one of the best performances of his career as well. He has a very emotionally charged performance in this film. He relies on a lot of facial expressions to convey those feelings to the audience, and he does it very well. And one of the most defining aspects of Top Gun Maverick is Tom Cruise and the rest of the cast are really flying. The visual effects in this movie are at a minimum, which is very nice to see in a modern day blockbuster. Jurassic World Dominion blends special effects and practical effects, but Top Gun Maverick, on the other hand, has very few computer generated effects. When you see the planes flying, that's actually planes flying. What you see on screen, in most cases, is really happening. So being a modern day blockbuster, there's a diverse cast. But this diverse cast doesn't feel cringeworthy, and it doesn't feel forced like every other modern film. There's no cliched stereotypes, and the new characters are actually likable, which is very rare. A lot of modern day characters are either stereotypes or they have no character development over the course of a film or several films. It's a good story combined with great action and believable and likable characters. Even the most unlikable of the new characters, Hangman, in his own right is pretty cool. Cruise is on point as always. John Hamm is the kind of antagonist to Cruise's character, and he is still likable. Miles Teller, outstanding as always, and was perfectly cast as Goose's son. You can really sense a connection between them. I'm making it sound like it's a perfect film, but it's not a perfect film. There's fuck-ups and continuity errors in it, like every other film. Nothing's perfect. And this is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't seen it, I'll give you a couple of seconds to turn off. Alright, so if you're listening past this point, I'm assuming you've seen it. So what happens to Maverick and Rooster's co-pilots when they are shot down? I can't remember if they do have co-pilot. I'm assuming they do have a co-pilot because everybody else does. And they needed someone to drop the bombs. I don't think Maverick has a co-pilot. I don't think he needed one, but I'm pretty sure Rooster does. So we assume they're dead. The F-18 in the hangar is a little improbable. There's lots of surplus F-14s around, I guess, so, why can't the bad guys buy them? They would be cheap. But at the same time, that is a cool little nostalgic moment back to the original. It's not corny, it does fit the script, and it does work. Even if it is a little improbable that a very old F-14 does take on more advanced planes and comes out on top. The other pilots do disappear quickly after the attack run, but one of the biggest improbable parts of the film is they're only given 3 weeks to train for a very dangerous mission, which is probably bullshit. I'd imagine if that was real life, they'd probably be training for 6 months or so. The bad guys in it are also relatively unknown. It's a faceless rogue state. The F-14 in all likelihood probably wouldn't be able to fly. I know it's in the hangar, the runway gets bombed. Everything's supposed to be taken out of commission except for a couple of advanced fighter planes on patrol. Whether the thing would fly or not, you know what, having the F-14 back and having Maverick back behind it with Rooster as his co-pilot, it pleases the fans and it works. It's a little bit of bullshit, but it does work, and overall it really isn't a big deal because the movie is great. It pleases the fan base and it leaves them wanting more. I wanted to see it again. It was a great movie. It pleases old fans and new fans. It just works. It brings all the elements together. It does them in an original way. It stays true to the original characters and the original movie, but it works. It doesn't feel corny or forced. It does its own thing, but still feels very much grounded in reality and believability. Tom Cruise doesn't disappoint, and he goes above and beyond for Top Gun Maverick. And if you haven't seen it in the cinema, I would urge you to go see it while you can, because it's worth every cent. Alright, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you everyone who listened to the end and put up with my in-depth recap review of Jurassic World Dominion and Top Gun Maverick. I'm a bit of a movie nerd, and I have thought about doing more movie reviews on the show. So thank you for humouring me and listening to the end. Alright, next episode will be an epic one. We're going to be looking at the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and just how all of it started. We're going to be looking at the war so far, the annexing of the Crimea. We are also going to be having a deep dive into the history of communism and how it all started and some of the key figures behind it, such as Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin. There's a lot more to the story than a lot of people might think. The story of communism isn't all it's made out to be, and there's a hidden truth to it. So definitely stay tuned for that. So thank you to everyone who listened to the end of the show. I'll be back in a couple of weeks with the next episode. If you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Download the Truth Tank on your preferred podcast player. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Samsung Podcasts, Google, and most other platforms you can think of. Follow and like the Facebook page. Help spread the word about the Truth Tank. Help get it out there. Tell anyone who you think might like it, friends, family, people you work with. You can rate and review the podcast. It helps it get noticed. But most importantly, just keep downloading episodes. That's the end of the show. A big thank you to everyone who listened. I'm the Tank. This is the truth. May the truth be with you.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero. All engine running. Liftoff.